Good morning.
Good morning.
I have the Billy Joel thing on the TV in the kitchen.
Oh,
I
are
have
you
to, I have
enjoying
to
it?
go, I have to go stop it so I can pause it so I can watch it when we're done.
Uh-huh.
I'm
Okay.
halfway through.
I'm
I
gonna go
love it.
shopping too. I know. It's fun to watch. Um, so we just walked in from taking David's car for a ride. We just walked in.
Where's the key? The key,
The what?
the key,
I don't know what he's talking about.
the keys.
The key?
What key? Did you beep?
Anyway, I'm back.
Okay.
He was saying, where's the keys? He had them. The
Ah.
keys, because usually when he stops the car, he gives me the keys, or else he loses them
Oh,
immediately.
you took the car for a ride.
We did. And
Ah.
now I can't tell you what a load off my mind.
Yes, I can just imagine.
So we took a kind of a long ride. We went all the way up.
I panicked at one time.
Oh, yeah.
I
Yeah.
panicked. We were in the
Why?
middle of the street and the car would not start.
Really?
Nothing. I said, this is the end.
Well, it's the end of something. I don't know.
It's the end of my time.
Anyway, it started eventually. So
It started, it went for its road trip and it came back.
back, and it's sitting in its place.
Okay, I have to go take my eggs off the fire. Hold on.
Go.
I'll be
Go.
back.
All right.
All righty then.
Good morning.
Good
Good
morning.
morning. Good morning.
Good
Good morning. Good morning. It's right to say, okay, good morning. Good morning.
I'm so nice.
Best to you each morning. KELLO double good.
Oh, did something wrong. Yes. It's been a while since I did that. Okay, so yesterday we finished with this prohibition against selling land in the land of Israel as a permanent sale. And that is as saying the land shall not be sold in perpetuity. The regulations of this commandment have been explained in Arachin. So yesterday I was just reading to you the results from Perplexity, a search in Perplexity. So there's an actual article based on a shiur given by Rav Aaron Lichtenstein. So this is not that common. When we've been looking up various issues from etzion.org or Virtual Beit Midrash, there's a lot of people that we've seen that we've gotten a chance to see several articles from these people, but we have not had one from Rav Aaron Lichtenstein, who was the Rosh Hashiva of the Yeshiva in Alon Shvut in the Gush, and quite an impressive scholar. So the prohibition to sell land in perpetuity is derived from the verse Vayikra 25:23. The land shall not be sold forever, for the land is mine. You are strangers and sojourners with me. What is the meaning of this prohibition? As we can see, the Torah formulates this prohibition not as a command, but as a statement of facts. We must therefore clarify whether in fact there exists a prohibition to sell land forever, or whether the Torah wishes to say that such a sale has no validity. Assuming that indeed the verse teaches a prohibition, questions arise regarding the substance of the prohibition and those who are bound by it. Rashi on the spot explains, this is intended to charge with the transgression of a negative commandment the neglect of returning the fields to their owners in the Jubilee year. It commands that the buyer must not detain it. So this prohibition not to sell land in Israel in perpetuity is a general it's a general prohibition that would apply to Jews and non-Jews, and that is land is supposed to return at the time of Yovel. So if somebody would sell land in such a way that it was not going to be returned at the time of Yovel, they would violate this commandment. That's according to Rashi. Rashi maintains that the verse establishes a prohibition that falls upon the buyer. In line with this position, Rashi argues that the buyer does not violate the prohibition at the time of the purchase, but rather when he fails to return the land to its original owner in the Jubilee year. According to Rashi, the prohibition only applies when the laws of the Jubilee year are in effect. The Rambam agrees with Rashi that we are dealing here with a prohibition, but he disagrees with him about its content. In Hilchos Shemitah V'Yovel, he rules chapter 11, halacha 1, he rules as follows. No part of the land of Israel that was divided among the tribes may be sold in perpetuity. As it is said, the land shall not be sold forever. If it is sold in perpetuity, both buyer and seller have transgressed a negative commandment. Their act avails nothing, and the field must be restored to its original owner in the Jubilee year. The Rambam rules that the prohibition applies to both sides of the transaction, to the seller and to the buyer. It follows from this that the prohibition is not connected to the purchaser's refusal to return the land in the Jubilee year. We shall see that, according to the Rambam, the prohibition is violated at the time of the purchase. So he has set up so far what we would call a machlokas, a disagreement between Rashi and the Rambam. According to Rashi, this applies to the buyer, and it is violated when the buyer refuses to return the land at the Jubilee year. According to the Rambam, this prohibition applies to both the buyer and the seller, and they violate this prohibition right away at the time of purchase. There is room to ask whether, according to the Rambam, there is any significance to the realities on the ground beyond the conditions of the sale. What is the law, for example, if the land was sold at a time when the laws of Jubilee year were in effect, but before the Jubilee year actually arrived? The laws ceased to be in effect. But before the Jubilee actually arrived, the laws ceased to be in effect and the land was never returned. Have the buyer and seller violated the prohibition since it turned out that the land was sold forever? Or did they not violate the prohibition since the transaction took place when the laws of the Jubilee year were still operative? Another example, if the buyer bought land in perpetuity, but now has regrets and wishes to return the property. Does the return of the property have any significance? Or perhaps the buyer has already violated the prohibition when he bought the land forever? In contrast to what was cited above, the Rambam writes in his Sefer HaMitzvot, negative commandment number 227, that's us. By this prohibition, we are forbidden to sell our holdings in the land of Israel in perpetuity. It is contained in his words, the land shall not be sold forever. Regarding the content of the prohibition, as it appears in the Rambam Sefer HaMitzvot, the Ramban, Nachmanides, raises the following question. The meaning of this prohibition is not clear to me. For a person is not obligated to mention at the time of sale, I am selling it until the Jubilee year. Rather, all sales are performed without specification. My field is sold to you. My house is sold to you. The Jubilee year restores the sold property to the original owner, whether this was not specified or it was stated explicitly. Always. As the sages have said, the Jubilee year is a royal cancellation. It would seem, and thus the Ramban proposes later in the passage, that the Rambam is referring to a case where the buyer and seller explicitly stipulated that the land would be sold in perpetuity. The Ramban continues, and I saw that Rabbi Shlomo, that's Rashi, says in his commentary to the Torah, this is intended to charge with the transgression of a negative commandment, the neglect of returning the fields to their owner in the Jubilee year. It commands that the buyer must not detain it. But this is not the plain meaning of this prohibition, for it falls upon the seller, not the buyer. Perhaps we can explain the land shall not be sold to you forever, that you should detain it forever. It may also be suggested that this is a prohibition against stating explicitly, I'm selling you this field in perpetuity, even after the Jubilee year. So it could be that that's what was being considered. In other words, when the Torah said that you're not supposed to sell it in perpetuity, even though it may not work because you could say whatever you want and the land is going to get returned in the Jubilee year, but it could be that the very fact that you entered an agreement with had those words in it is considered a violation, even if in the end the land was returned by authorities when the Jubilee year happened. All the Rishonim thus far cited, that's Rashi and the Rambam, assume that we are dealing with a prohibition. The author of the Halachot Gedolot and the Yereim omit this mitzvah from their list of 613 commandments. And so it appears that they maintain that there is no prohibition here. So there was an earlier work that laid out which are the 613 mitzvot, called the Halachot Gedolot. And this was one of the works that inspired the Rambam to write his own Sefer HaMitzvot, because he felt that the Bahag included all sorts of mitzvot that should not be included. Now, here's an example where the Bahag does not include a mitzvah that the Rambam has for some reason. And then Rabbi Lichtenstein goes on to say the Ramban makes a similar suggestion. The meaning of this prohibition, according to the author of Halachot Gedolot, is that it is not a prohibition at all. Rather, God commanded, and in all the land of your possession you shall grant a redemption for the land. For this land cannot be sold in perpetuity because it's not yours. Rather, you are strangers and sojourners in it with him. For this reason, the author of Halachot Gedolot did not mention this negative commandment, for according to him, it is a negation, not a prohibition. In other words, it's saying it won't work. It's not telling you it's forbidden to do it. And not as the Rambam Maimonides, our Rambam, suspected that he did not understand the idea of negation at all. So the Rambam thinks that the Bahag doesn't understand how this whole thing works, but it's very possible he does, that Baal Halachos Gedolos is saying that the Torah is not telling you not to do this. The Torah is telling you it doesn't work. The Torah limits a person's capacity to sell land and establishes that land cannot be sold in perpetuity. Not that it's forbidden to do it, it's that it doesn't work. The Ramban, Nachmanides, however, concludes that indeed there exists a prohibition to sell land forever, but the prohibition relates to the sale of portions of Eretz Yisrael to non-Jews, though there is no connection between this prohibition and the prohibition of lo techanem. Now, lo techanem was the prohibition of selling land to non-Jews, which we had learned earlier. It would appear from what they say that this is a prohibition that we should not leave the land in the hands of non-Jews in perpetuity or leave it to them as a perpetual state. The idea is that just as we were commanded regarding our bodies that are sold to non-Jews, that they do not have possession of our bodies as they expounded, and they do not purchase from you. And we were admonished about avodat perach, as it says, he shall not rule with vigor over him in your sight, and that we should release them in the Jubilee year, as it says, then he shall go out in the year of the Jubilee, both he and his children with him. The reason for all of this is explained, for to me the children of Israel are servants. They are my servants who I brought forth out of the land of Egypt. So too, we were warned about the land after command. So just like we were warned about slavery or Jewish servants, that there's a limit to how long they can be held in servitude, so too we were warned about the land. After commanding us about the restoration of the land of the Jubilee year, that he commanded the buyer to restore it. He also commanded the seller that he should take care not to sell the land in perpetuity, namely to one who will detain it and not practice the law of the Jubilee year with us, i.e. to non-Jews. Rather, we should take care that our sales be such that the land returns to us in any case, and that we should not leave it in their hands forever. He gave us reasons similar to the reason regarding our bodies, the sale of our bodies. For the land is his, may he be elevated and blessed, and we're all strangers and sojourners with him. And he does not wish to settle there anyone else but us. Only in our hands should it remain, and to us it shall be restored. A non-Jew is not bound by the laws of the Jubilee year. Thus, the sale of land to a non-Jew is by definition, a sale in perpetuity. And this is what the Torah prohibits. Okay, so again, this is the Ramban's explanation. According to Rashi and the Rambam, Maimonides, our Rambam, this is a law forbidding the sale from one Jew to another Jew, but with a stipulation that it not be returned at the time of the Jubilee year. This, according to the Ramban, that is not what this is. According to Nachmanides, this is a prohibition against selling land to Gentiles because it will in fact be a sale in perpetuity, because they are not obliged in the laws of Yovel. What is the focus of the prohibition according to the Ramban? Is it the injury on the national level, in that the land is taken out of the hands of Jews? Or is it the injury on a religious level, in that the land belongs not to man, but to God, and he gave it to Israel? The Ramban mentions both points, but the Torah Kohanim, halachic midrash, emphasizes the injury to the kingdom of Israel. The land shall not be sold forever, for you are strangers and sojourners. Do not consider yourselves the main thing. Okay. Is there a way to circumvent the prohibition and sell land in perpetuity? Regarding the release of debts in the sabbatical year, for example, if the borrower and the lender stipulated that the sabbatical year would not release the debt, it does not do so. Does a similar law apply to the sale of land in perpetuity? According to the majority of Rishonim, medieval commentators, when the land is sold without further specification, the Jubilee year releases the land by way of royal cancellation, automatic cancellation of the sale by God, unconnected to any stipulation attached to the sale by the parties. All the Rishonim agree that the Jubilee year releases the land even if the sale had been made without any stipulations, and even if the seller does not demand that his land be returned to him. However, regarding a sale in which the parties explicitly stipulated that the Jubilee year would not affect a release, the Rishonim disagree. The Ramban in the Sefer HaMitzvot, so again, the Rambam wrote our work, which is the book of mitzvahs. Nachmanides, the Ramban, wrote like a critical text. In other words, he is basing his critical comments on the Rambam's book of mitzvot that we are doing. So if you're looking up the Ramban with regard to mitzvot, you would look up in the Sefer HaMitzvot that includes the criticisms of Nachmanides, the Ramban. The Ramban in the Sefer HaMitzvot testifies that the Rambam maintains that such a sale is valid. And I saw in his great work that one may stipulate regarding the Jubilee year on condition that he will not return it in the Jubilee year, just as we said regarding the sabbatical year. So he says, according to the Rambam, you're not supposed to do it, but if you did it, it works. You can sell land, and the stipulation in the sale will be that it will not return at the time of the Jubilee year. And it will work. It's wrong to do it, but it will work. That's what the Ramban says, the Rambam says. However, no such law is found in our text of the Rambam. The accepted understanding is that in any case, the sale is not valid forever. Why is a loan valid, even if it was extended on condition that it would not be released by the sabbatical year, whereas a sale of land is not valid if it is made on condition that it would not be canceled by the Jubilee year? The difference seems to be that in the case of a loan, the lender does not violate a transgression at the time of the loan, but only at the time of the repayment, when he demands repayment of the loan, and he's not supposed to. In contrast, regarding the Jubilee year, the parties violate a prohibition at the time of the sale, and a sale that involves a transgression is not valid. There are those who wished to prove this point from the Gemara. Okay, all right. So I think we're getting a sense here of, this is going to go on for some way. We get a sense here of how this mitzvah is treated by other Rishonim medieval commentaries. And again, we saw that Rebbe Ovadia Yosef, and we saw this when it came to Lo Tichanem as well. There was a responsa by he's called the Tzitz Eliezer, Reb Eliezer Waldenberg. I'm sorry, it was not his. It was a responsa of I remember his name. Anyways, he's contemporary who's very much alive and writing his own responsa. Rav Usher Weiss. So he quoted Rebbe Ovadia Yosef as saying that there is a long tradition in Israel to sell land to Muslims, to Arabs. And Lo Techanem itself may not apply second. Oh yeah, it may only apply to idolaters, not to people who like Muslims who believe in the one God. But no such stipulation appears here about selling the land forever. But for some reason, Rebbe Ovadia Yosef allows it. It's possible he allows it because there is no Jubilee year now. The Jubilee year is not practiced now. again, because the conditions aren't right. I think one of the conditions that has to be in effect for the Jubilee year to take effect is that all of the tribes are in their right place. I don't know what that will look like when it finally happens, but that Dan will have a representation in the area that belongs to Dan. Yehuda will have a representation in the land that belongs to Yehuda. So at that point, the Jubilee will kick in again. So it could be that that's part of the reason that the later authorities are permitting this here, even though it amounts to a sale for perpetuity, because if a Gentile owns this property, he, you know, he could keep the property for forever. Yeah.
I had always thought that the Yovel went right out of my mind. I'm sorry.
There's Shemitah, there's Shemitah, which we say applies rabbinically nowadays. Also, I think because the Yovel's not being practiced, I think that's part of it.
Oh yeah,
Yeah.
That
Yeah.
I
Go ahead.
thought the basic problem was they lost count. They
Yeah,
don't know when the Yovel year is. So you
but
can
part
have
of the
that.
reason they lost count is that they would there's no reason, there's no practical reason to know it right now. For the like Shemitah, somehow we know the Shemitah,
Yeah.
right? So and we, all right, let's just see here.
I mean, there must be something, the custom of our forefathers is in our hands. If they were, always doing it, yeah, why not continue? How could they lose track? It has religious significance.
Right. All right. So again, all right, again, I'm just doing this with perplexity. So the main reason the mitzvah of Yovel does not apply today is that according to Jewish law, its observance requires the majority of all Jewish tribes to live in the land of Israel, for the population to be settled according to their tribal territories. Since the destruction and exile of the tribes, especially after the fall of the kingdom of Israel in 722, these conditions have not been met. Therefore, the practical laws of Yovel have not been observed for centuries. In addition, even though the sabbatical year is still kept by many in modern Israel, the specific Yovel rules, such as land returning to ancestral owners and freeing of slaves, are considered inapplicable by contemporary Jewish rabbinic Judaism. Yeah, that's not going to be good enough, though. Let's see.
Well, maybe you're just right. I mean, you said contemporary halakhic authorities do it for the reason cited.
Right, but let's just see. I'm just asking as a follow-up, what does the Rambam say about this? It's saying why. Well, all he's saying here is that this is the reason that Shemitah is rabbinic, because we're not observing Yovel. But why didn't they just say keep the Yovel rabbinically, just like they say keep Shemitah rabbinically? Second thing here. Me? Mm. I don't know. They just has some general theory. He's not quoting anybody about it. Yeah. So for some reason, they did not want Yovel. They did not decide to apply the laws of Yovel rabbinically, whereas they do the land laws of Shemitah. In the perplexity, it's suggesting that the laws of Yovel require a kind of national conditions to be in place, because you're returning land to its original owners. It's not simply, just a private observance of a farmer or a citizen with regard to farmed crops, but it requires a more general national condition. I don't know. It's a good point. I have heard that. I mean, I know that we don't know when Yovel is, but again, I assume that's because there wasn't it wasn't being applied, and so after a long time of not being applied, it just sort of fell out of knowledge. But yeah, more needs to be filled in, and I know there's somebody who talks about it. I just can't figure out who it is right now. Okay. Next mitzvah, which is mitzvah 228. He prohibited us from changing the open places of the Levites, and that is his saying, and the field of the open place of their cities. You know the language of the Torah, that cities and open places be given to the Levites, meaning to say 1,000 amot as an open place, and 2,000 amot going out from there for fields and vineyards, as it has been explained in Sota. The prohibition comes to the Levites not to change these distinctions, that they not make the city an open place, or the open place a city, the field an open place, or the open place a field. In other words, there's zoning restrictions. These are real zoning restrictions. And even the Levim, even if they all wanted to change it, cannot change it. And that is his saying, shall not be sold. And the tradition comes to explain that this indicates that its nature not be changed, and the regulations of this commandment have already been explained in Eruvin. So again, when, let's say, in a time in the not too distant future, the conditions are ripe to once again observe Yovel. And so that means that we are as part of that, it seems like there has to be some kind of a decision about where the tribal areas are. And I'm assuming then that there are going to be cities that are going to go back to being Levite cities. And if that's the case, even though these cities may be a modern big city right now, it would still, you would think it would still have to have by its design this a wall, and then outside of the wall, these specific measures of land for the particular purposes mentioned. That's something that would somehow we'd have to go back to, because it seems like that law is still on the books here. Okay. He prohibited us from abandoning and ignoring the Levites regarding the giving of their due and gladdening them on the festival. And his saying, guard yourself lest you forsake the Levite. This is a negative commandment. So, not giving them their tithes, that is part of this, but there's also something called gladdening them on the festival. The Samchem Beregel, he calls it. This is Hakel. Why is this Hakel? Why are we reading Hakel? Why did it take us to that one? When I go there to Festival Offering 3, it takes me to Hakel. All right, I'm just gonna look this up, and then we will call it a day. I just want to look this up. What constitutes gladdening the Levim on the festivals? I'm reading Jewish sites here. No, I don't. Yeah, so according to Perplexity, you're just supposed to pay attention to make sure that the Levim are enjoying the festivals, which might include providing for their festival needs. but it doesn't have a specific, something like this would have specific parameters. But the sources here, they're not Jewish sources. All right. Let's look at this. Again, I will do work to find out specifically what is being asked of us when it refers to v'samchem beregel, make them happy on the regel. But this is actually a negative commandment, which is abandoning the Leviim. So you're not supposed to abandon them. And we'll figure out what that includes. Okay. I am grateful that we got to learn together. And for the ladies, we'll get together tomorrow at 10 a.m. on Thursday. Yeah.
If you tell, do not abandon the Levites, that's a negative commandment, but it doesn't, but you're not performing any action.
Right. You're withholding.
So
So
that seems more like
you,
a positive. It seems more like a positive.
well, it's a negative commandment, but you wouldn't have you wouldn't get lashes for it. But I mean, like for instance, let's say there's a mitzvah. Let's say they say it's forbidden to fast on certain days. So the way you transgress it is by not eating.
Yes.
But it's a negative commandment. You're not allowed to fast.
Yes, but I don't get lashes.
Right. You wouldn't get lashes, but it still would be counted as a negative commandment. So to here, this would be counted as a negative commandment. You're abandoning the Levim, but how do you abandon them? By not providing them with their tithes or not taking care of them. So it's a negative commandment, but you wouldn't get lashes. Yeah.
It somehow doesn't seem quite right. Okay. Thank you.
All right. If you can think of how, we'll talk about it. All right. Be well.
Thank you.
Okay, guys. Bye-bye.